The morning shift on New Haven began like any other morning for the past 17 years. Children walked to school through streets lined with earth oak trees that had finally adapted to the planet's slightly orange sun. Markets opened their doors, filling the air with the smell of fresh bread and imported coffee. Margaret Chen stood at her bakery counter, arranging pastries while humming an old song her grandmother taught her back on Earth. She had no idea that in exactly 4 hours, her world would cease to exist. New Haven wasn't humanity's first colony, nor was it the largest. Sitting on the outer edge of explored space, it housed roughly 2 million souls who had left Earth seeking a quieter life. The planet offered vast blue oceans, breathable air, and land that yielded crops without too much coaxing. Most colonists were farmers, teachers, artists, and families who wanted their children to grow up under open skies instead of the crowded megacities of Earth. Admiral Jiang Wei sat in his office on the orbital defense station, reviewing supply manifests with the enthusiasm of a man doing his taxes. The station was more of a glorified customs checkpoint than a military installation. In 17 years, the most exciting event had been a meteor shower that looked pretty against the planet's atmosphere. Jiang had been a decorated officer during the corporate wars, but now he spent his days approving cargo shipments and making sure visiting ships had proper documentation. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, brought him his morning tea. The ritual had remained unchanged for 3 years. She would make a joke about the terrible quality of military rations. He would pretend to laugh, and they would discuss the incredibly boring day ahead. Sarah had been advocating for a transfer to a more active posting, somewhere closer to the core worlds where things actually happened. Jiang always told her the same thing: be grateful for boring because boring means everyone goes home safe. The detection grid pinged at exactly 0847 hours local time. Jiang glanced at the monitor, expecting to see a scheduled transport or perhaps a research vessel that had wandered slightly off course. Instead, his screen showed something that made his blood turn cold. 700 contacts had just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Then 700 more appeared, and another 700 after that. Sarah rushed into his office without knocking. Her face had gone pale, and her hands trembled as she clutched a data pad. Jiang was already on his feet, moving toward the command center before she could speak. The main display screen in the command center showed a sight that no human had ever witnessed in the 2 centuries since humanity first ventured into space. Thousands upon thousands of ships filled the outer system, appearing in perfect geometric formations that stretched across millions of kilometers. Zhang's training kicked in, pushing aside the shock. He opened a channel to New Haven's planetary government while simultaneously activating the colony's emergency broadcast system. Governor Patricia Okonkwo appeared on his screen, confusion written across her features. She had been in the middle of a meeting about improving the school district's science curriculum. The conversation lasted 42 seconds. Jiang explained what he was seeing, though the words felt unreal as they left his mouth. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to horror. She started to ask questions, but Jiang cut her off. There wasn't time for questions. He gave her a direct order: begin immediate evacuation procedures. Every ship, every transport, every private yacht that could break atmosphere needed to start loading people right now. The alien fleet moved with purpose. They accelerated toward New Haven at speeds that made Jiang's tactical computer flash warning symbols. His defense station had 12 patrol craft, 8 defense drones, and enough missiles to maybe inconvenience a mid-sized pirate crew. Against thousands of unknown vessels, he might as well throw rocks. Down on the planet, emergency sirens wailed across every city and town. People poured out of buildings, looking up at skies that seemed suddenly hostile. Parents grabbed children from schools. The spaceport became a nightmare of pushing crowds and desperate voices. Every available ship began boarding procedures, but there weren't enough ships, There would never be enough ships. Margaret Chen locked her bakery door and ran toward the spaceport. Her husband worked in the agricultural sector on the planet's far side, too far away to reach in time. She had tried calling him 17 times. He wasn't answering. She pushed through the crowds with her 2 daughters clutching her hands, fighting against the tide of humanity that all had the same desperate plan. Zhang watched helplessly as the alien fleet divided into 3 groups. One maintained position at the system's edge. Another moved to block any escape routes toward the hyperspace jump points. The third accelerated directly toward New Haven. His tactical officer kept updating the estimated time until weapons range, counting down minutes that felt like seconds. He gave the order to launch all patrol craft. 12 small ships piloted by young men and women who had signed up for boring customs duty raced out to meet an armada. Zhang knew he was sending them to die, but he also knew that every minute they bought was another few thousand people who might make it onto evacuation ships. The pilots knew it too. Not one hesitated. The engagement lasted 6 minutes. The alien ships didn't even slow down. Zhang watched 12 green icons on his display wink out of existence, one after another. Lieutenant Morrison stood beside him, tears streaming down her face as she maintained her post and continued coordinating the evacuation. Professional until the end. 300 ships managed to lift off from New Haven's surface. Some were proper transports designed for passenger service. Others were cargo haulers with people crammed into holds meant for grain and machinery. A few were personal yachts that could hold maybe 20 people in spaces designed for 5. They climbed desperately toward orbit, engines screaming at maximum thrust, hoping to reach the jump points before the alien fleet arrived. Zhang broadcast a final message on all frequencies. He identified himself, stated that New Haven was a peaceful colony with no military capabilities, and requested communication with whoever commanded the alien fleet. He repeated the message in 6 different languages, including the 2 known alien species that humanity had encountered during its expansion into space. Those species had been friendly, or at least not hostile. Trade and cultural exchange had been established. First contact protocols existed for a reason. The aliens answered with silence. Then they answered with fire. The first strikes hit New Haven's 3 major cities simultaneously. Zhang's sensors registered energy weapons of a type and magnitude that exceeded anything in humanity's arsenal. Where millions of people had been living their lives moments before, massive craters appeared. The destruction was surgical, precise, and absolute. Zhang activated the defense station's hyperspace beacon. It was designed to send an automated distress signal to the nearest military outpost, located 47 light-years away. The message was simple: New Haven under attack. Unknown hostile force, requesting immediate assistance. He knew that even traveling at maximum hyperspace velocity, help couldn't arrive for weeks. But he sent the message anyway, because that was what the regulations required, and following regulations was all he had left. The evacuation ships tried to scatter. Some made it to the jump points, others didn't. The alien vessels pursued with methodical efficiency, destroying fleeing transports with the same cold precision they had used on the cities. Zhang watched the tactical display as green icons representing civilian ships full of families and children vanished one by one. Each disappearing icon represented hundreds of lives ending in silent flashes of light against the black of space. Margaret Chen made it onto a transport with her daughters. The ship was a grain hauler called the Morning Star, owned by a farmer named Jacob, who had immigrated to New Haven 12 years ago. Jacob wasn't a trained pilot, but he knew enough to get the ship into orbit. 247 people packed into spaces meant for bulk cargo. They had no seats, no safety restraints, just desperate people holding on to whatever they could find as the ship shook and rattled its way toward space. The Morning Star cleared the atmosphere and plotted a course for the nearest jump point. Jacob pushed the engines past their recommended limits. Warning lights flashed across his control panel. A young woman who said she was an engineer tried to help, reading out numbers from displays she barely understood. In the cargo hold, Margaret held her daughters close and whispered that everything would be okay. She was lying, but it was the kind of lie that mothers tell when truth offers no comfort. Zhang's defense station shuddered as alien weapons found their mark. Sections decompressed explosively, venting atmosphere and people into space. Sarah Morrison died at her post when a bulkhead collapsed. She never stopped transmitting evacuation coordinates, even as the deck tilted beneath her feet and alarms screamed through failing speakers. Zhang felt the station breaking apart around him. He stayed at his command console, continuing to broadcast on all frequencies, still asking for communication, still trying to understand why this was happening. The answer never came. The aliens simply continued their work with mechanical efficiency. They targeted every structure humanity had built on New Haven: cities, towns, farms, research stations, communication arrays. Nothing was spared. Within 2 hours, a colony that had existed for 17 years was reduced to burning craters and debris fields. Of the 300 ships that attempted to escape, 47 made it to hyperspace. The Morning Star was among them. Jacob's hands shook on the controls as he initiated the jump sequence. In the hold, Margaret Chen felt the strange sensation of reality twisting as the ship entered hyperspace. Her daughters asked if they were safe now. Margaret wanted to say yes. Instead, she said nothing and held them tighter. Zhang's defense station finally broke apart completely. In his last moments, he activated the emergency pod system, forcing the surviving crew members into escape pods whether they wanted to go or not. He didn't get into a pod himself. There weren't enough for everyone, and the captain stays with his ship. That was tradition. Some traditions mattered, even at the end. The escape pods scattered across the system, their tiny drives carrying them away from the destruction. Most were eventually picked up by the alien fleet. The occupants were not killed. Instead, they were taken aboard the alien vessels. Zhang would have found this fascinating if he had lived to learn about it. Why destroy a colony but preserve a few survivors? What purpose did that serve? The aliens remained in the New Haven system for 6 more hours. They systematically destroyed every trace of human presence: satellites, orbital facilities, mining operations on the system's asteroid belt. When they finally departed, they left behind a planet that looked as if humanity had never existed. Except for the craters. Those would remain for millions of years, scars on a world that had briefly been someone's home. The 47 ships that escaped scattered across nearby systems. Some headed for the closest colony. Others aimed for military outposts. The Morning Star jumped to a trading station called Prosperity Point, where Jacob managed to dock despite never having visited the station before. Margaret and her daughters stumbled off the ship along with 244 others. Some were injured. All were traumatized. Station personnel rushed to help, offering medical care and asking confused questions about what had happened. Margaret sat in a refugee center with her daughters sleeping against her shoulders. A young officer asked her to describe what she had seen. She started talking and couldn't stop. The words poured out in a jumbled stream. The sirens, the crowds, the desperate flight through streets she had walked safely for 17 years. The way the horizon had lit up with fire as the transport climbed toward orbit. The officer recorded everything, nodding occasionally, his expression growing darker as she spoke. Similar scenes played out across a dozen systems as the evacuation ships arrived at safe harbors. Each survivor told their story. The accounts varied in details, but agreed on the essential facts. An unknown alien force had appeared without warning and destroyed New Haven with overwhelming firepower. No communication, no demands, no mercy. Just methodical extermination. The reports traveled through civilian channels, bouncing between stations and colonies, spreading across human space through trade networks and communication relays. Within 48 hours of the attack, every human colony and station within 100 light-years knew that something terrible had happened at New Haven. The news spread like wildfire, carrying with it fear and questions that no one could answer. On Earth, the news reached the Admiralty through official military channels 3 days after the attack. Fleet Admiral Catherine North received Admiral Zhang's distress signal, along with automated data packets from New Haven's surveillance network that had managed to transmit before being destroyed. She watched the footage in her office, alone, her face illuminated by the cold light of her display screen. The footage showed everything: the arrival of the alien fleet, the futile resistance of Zhang's patrol craft, the destruction of cities filled with civilians, the desperate flight of evacuation ships, the systematic annihilation of everything humanity had built in that system. Catherine watched it twice, forcing herself to see every detail, to understand exactly what had happened. Then she sat in silence for 17 minutes, her hands folded on her desk, her expression unreadable. When she finally stood, her movements were those of someone who had made a decision that would change everything. She scheduled an emergency meeting of the Combined Fleet Command. Every admiral, every general, every officer above the rank of captain received orders to report to fleet headquarters immediately. Drop everything. Cancel all leave. This couldn't wait. The meeting convened 6 hours later in a secure briefing room deep beneath Geneva. 53 of humanity's highest-ranking military officers gathered around a conference table, their faces reflecting confusion and concern. Many had served together during the corporate wars. Some were old friends, others were rivals. All of that became irrelevant the moment Catherine activated the main display and showed them what had happened at New Haven. The room fell silent. Officers who had commanded fleets in battle, who had seen death and destruction in war, sat frozen as they watched a peaceful colony die. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, commander of the Second Fleet, asked the question on everyone's mind. Who were these aliens, and why had they attacked? Catherine had no answers to the first question. The alien ships matched no known design. Their weapons technology exceeded humanity's understanding. The surviving sensor data provided some specifications, but nothing that explained their origin or identity. As for the second question, the why, Catherine could only speculate. Perhaps humanity had unknowingly violated some territorial claim. Perhaps the aliens had a policy of eliminating any species they encountered. Perhaps there was no reason at all that humans would understand. What she did know was this: 2 million human beings were dead. They had died without warning, without mercy, without even the dignity of understanding why. The aliens had demonstrated both capability and will to destroy human colonies. New Haven might only be the first target. Every human settlement in explored space was potentially at risk. Admiral Isabella Chen asked about diplomatic options. Perhaps they could attempt to make contact, to understand what had provoked the attack, to negotiate some kind of peace. Catherine had already considered this. She had consulted with the diplomatic corps, with xenologists and linguists, with anyone who might offer insight into alien psychology. The consensus was that Zhang had already attempted communication, following all established protocols, and been ignored. The aliens had answered humanity's peaceful overtures with extinction-level violence. The discussion continued for hours. Some argued for caution, for strengthening defenses around key colonies while attempting to gather more information. Others advocated for immediate retaliation, for hunting down the aliens and making them pay for what they had done. Catherine let them talk. Let them voice every opinion and concern. She had already made her decision. But democracy mattered, even in military command structures. When the debate finally exhausted itself, Catherine stood. She moved to the main display and pulled up a star map showing all of human space. 347 colonies, ranging from massive settlements housing billions to small outposts with populations in the thousands. Hundreds of stations, mining operations, research facilities, 2 centuries of expansion and growth representing humanity's greatest achievement, spreading life from one world to many. She spoke without notes, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. The aliens had demonstrated their intentions clearly. They destroyed human colonies without provocation or communication. They possessed overwhelming military superiority. They showed no interest in negotiation or diplomacy. Under these circumstances, humanity faced a simple choice: surrender the stars and retreat to Earth, hoping the aliens would be satisfied or fight back with everything available. Catherine knew what surrender meant. Humanity would abandon everyone living outside Earth's solar system. 347 colonies full of people who had left Earth seeking new lives would be left defenseless. The aliens would destroy them all one by one, and humanity would do nothing. That was unacceptable. Those colonists were human beings. They deserved protection. They deserved justice. They deserved revenge. As for fighting back, Catherine had already run the numbers. Humanity's combined military forces numbered approximately 2 million active personnel, with reserves that could triple that number if necessary. The fleet consisted of roughly 12,000 vessels of various sizes and capabilities. Against the force that had destroyed New Haven, this would not be enough. Not even close. But humanity had something the aliens might not expect: industrial capacity. Earth and the major colonies possessed shipyards, manufacturing facilities, resource extraction operations that could be converted to war production. Humanity had fought wars before, had learned hard lessons about mobilization and logistics during the corporate wars. Those lessons could be applied again, but on a scale never before attempted. Catherine proposed a plan so ambitious that several officers initially thought she was speaking hypothetically. She wanted to mobilize every shipyard in human space for war production. She wanted to conscript or recruit personnel from across all colonies. She wanted to convert civilian manufacturing to military applications. She wanted to build not thousands of ships, but hundreds of thousands. She wanted to create the largest military force in human history. The room erupted in discussion. Officers raised practical concerns about logistics, about training, about the time required to build such a force. The aliens could attack other colonies while humanity prepared. Resources would be strained to breaking points. The economic impact would be catastrophic. Every concern was valid, every objection grounded in reality. Catherine acknowledged them all. Then she asked a simple question: what was the alternative? Admiral Rodriguez provided the answer everyone was thinking. There was no alternative. Not really. Humanity either fought or died. Those were the only choices the aliens had left. If humanity was going to fight, it needed to fight with overwhelming force, with the kind of military might that would make the aliens reconsider their aggression. Half measures would only result in more dead colonies and inevitable defeat. The vote was called at 0342 hours, nearly 24 hours after the meeting had begun. 53 officers voted on whether to recommend full military mobilization to the civilian government. The vote was unanimous. Catherine had expected nothing less. They were warriors. When someone attacked humanity, warriors didn't debate. They responded. The proposal went to Earth's government within hours. The Premier and her cabinet reviewed the plan, consulted with economists and scientists, and reached the same conclusion the military had. The aliens had fired the first shot. Humanity would respond with everything it had. The authorization came back approved, with the full backing of Earth's government and a mandate to coordinate with all colony governments. The mobilization order went out simultaneously to every human world. Shipyards received priority orders for military construction. Manufacturing facilities began retooling for weapons production. Recruitment centers opened across colonies, with volunteers flooding in faster than processing could handle. The survivors from New Haven became the most effective recruitment tool imaginable. Their stories spread through every human settlement, generating waves of anger and determination. On Prosperity Point, Margaret Chen watched a recruitment advertisement on the refugee center's public screen. The ad showed images of New Haven before the attack, happy families and peaceful streets. Then it showed the aftermath. The voiceover was simple. They destroyed our home, they killed our families, they think we are weak. It ended with a question. Will you prove them wrong? Margaret's daughters were safe. They were being cared for by station personnel while she processed trauma and tried to figure out what came next. She couldn't fight. She was a baker, not a soldier. But she could do something. Everyone could do something. The recruitment center signed her up as a logistics coordinator. Someone had to make sure the soldiers were fed. Someone had to make sure supplies reached the right places. If she couldn't hold a weapon, she could at least support those who did. Stories like Margaret's multiplied across human space. Civilians became soldiers, scientists became weapons developers, artists became propagandists. The corporate wars had divided humanity, but the attack on New Haven united it with singular purpose. Every colony government pledged support. Every major corporation offered resources. Religious leaders spoke of righteous defense. Political rivals put aside differences. For the first time in its history, humanity truly acted as one species with one goal. The shipyards worked around the clock. Construction crews operated in 3 shifts, building vessels at rates that should have been impossible. New techniques were developed on the fly, shortcuts were found, efficiency became an obsession. The first new warships rolled out of production 6 weeks after mobilization began. They were crude compared to pre-war military vessels, built for function rather than elegance, but they were numerous and they were deadly. Catherine established fleet headquarters on a massive station called Olympus, orbiting Earth. From there, she coordinated the greatest military buildup in history. She met with admirals and generals, with engineers and scientists, with politicians and colonists. She slept 4 hours a night and consumed enough coffee to kill a normal person. Her staff worried about her health. She ignored them. There would be time for rest after the aliens were destroyed. The training facilities processed recruits faster than anyone thought possible. Young men and women who had been farmers, teachers, shop clerks 6 months ago learned to operate weapons systems and pilot spacecraft. Veterans from the corporate wars came out of retirement, bringing experience and knowledge to raw recruits. The quality might not match pre-war military standards, but quantity had a quality all its own. That was the bet Catherine was making. 3 months after mobilization began, humanity's first revenge fleet launched. It consisted of 12,000 newly constructed warships carrying 200,000 personnel. Admiral Rodriguez commanded the force, his flag on a battlecruiser named Righteous Fury. The fleet's mission was simple: find the aliens and hurt them. Make them understand that attacking humanity had consequences, but 12,000 ships was just the beginning. Behind them, the shipyards continued their work. More fleets assembled, each larger than the last. Personnel training pipelines produced qualified crews faster than ships came offline. The industrial machine humanity had built over 2 centuries of expansion was now fully devoted to war, and its output was staggering. 6 months after New Haven fell, Catherine stood in Olympus's observation deck and watched the 7th Revenge Fleet depart. This one numbered 40,000 ships. Behind it, 8 more fleets were in various stages of assembly. By the 1-year mark, humanity would have over 200,000 warships operational. By 18 months, 400,000. The projections said that within 2 years of mobilization, humanity would field 700,000 battlefleets. 700,000. The number seemed absurd, impossible. It represented more military vessels than had existed in all of human history combined. It represented an industrial effort that would bankrupt economies and exhaust resources. It represented millions of personnel pulled from civilian life and trained for war. It represented the complete and total commitment of humanity's resources to a single purpose: revenge. Catherine thought about Admiral Zhang's final message. She thought about the children who died in New Haven's schools. She thought about families torn apart, lives ended without warning, a colony erased as if it had never existed. The aliens had made a mistake. They had assumed humanity would accept destruction passively. They had assumed wrong. The observation deck's windows showed Earth below, blue and beautiful and unchanged. But humanity had changed. The attack on New Haven had awakened something primal, something that connected every human across all colonies and worlds. The aliens had killed humans, and humans took that personally. They would learn that lesson the hard way. Catherine activated her command console and reviewed deployment schedules for the next 6 months. 50 more fleets would launch in that time. Each would hunt the aliens across every system they had ever touched. Each would carry humanity's message: you started this war, but we will finish it. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. You destroyed one of our colonies. We will destroy your entire civilization. The war was just beginning and humanity was done being the victim. Now came the revenge. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the righteous fury, watching his tactical display with the intensity of a man who knew he was making history. His first revenge fleet had been searching for 3 weeks, jumping from system to system, following every lead and rumor about alien activity. So far, they had found nothing but empty space and the occasional confused trader who wondered why 12,000 warships had suddenly appeared asking questions. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A survey team operating near the frontier had detected unusual energy signatures in an uncharted system designated only as Sigma 447. The signatures matched the readings from New Haven's sensors before they went offline. Rodriguez ordered the fleet to jump immediately, consequences and caution abandoned in favor of action. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, thousands of ships appearing simultaneously in a display of coordination that would have been impossible before the war. Rodriguez's tactical officer began scanning immediately, and within seconds the display lit up with contacts. 43 alien vessels occupied the system, orbiting a gas giant. They appeared to be mining operations, harvesting hydrogen and helium from the planet's atmosphere. Rodriguez smiled for the first time in months. The aliens had made their second mistake. The first was attacking New Haven. The second was assuming humanity wouldn't come looking for payback. He opened a channel to the fleet and gave a speech that would be studied in military academies for generations. It was 3 sentences long. They killed 2 million of our people. They thought we would do nothing. Show them how wrong they were. The fleet attacked as one unified force. 12,000 ships against 43 should have been overkill, and it was. But Rodriguez wanted to make a statement. Humanity's new warships might have been built quickly, but they carried weapons that years of focused research had improved. Missiles that could track targets across millions of kilometers. Energy weapons that could slice through armor like paper, point defense systems that could intercept incoming fire with 90% accuracy. The alien vessels tried to flee. Some succeeded in reaching their hyperspace jump points. Most didn't. Rodriguez's fleet surrounded them, cutting off escape routes, herding them like prey animals. The engagement lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, 37 alien vessels had been destroyed. 6 had escaped, carrying with them a message that Rodriguez very much wanted delivered. Humanity was coming, and humanity was angry. The fleet didn't stop there. Rodriguez ordered his ships to destroy every structure the aliens had built in the system. Mining platforms, refining stations, automated collectors. If the aliens had touched it, it burned. Then he deployed survey teams to scan the wreckage, gathering every piece of data possible about alien technology and capabilities. The scientists and engineers who accompanied the fleet went to work immediately, cutting into destroyed hulls, analyzing weapons systems, trying to understand how the enemy operated. News of the victory spread across human space faster than the fleet could travel. 12,000 ships had engaged the aliens and won decisively. The impossible had happened. The species that destroyed New Haven could be hurt, could be defeated, could be killed. Morale across all colonies skyrocketed. Recruitment doubled. Production quotas were exceeded. If one fleet could do this much damage, imagine what 700,000 fleets could accomplish. But Rodriguez knew something that the celebrating civilians didn't. The aliens they had encountered were not a military force. They had been mining vessels with minimal defensive capabilities. The real test would come when humanity faced actual alien warships, the kind that had destroyed New Haven so efficiently. Still, a victory was a victory, and humanity needed victories right now. On Earth, Catherine received Rodriguez's report and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Then she went back to work. One battle didn't win a war. She had more fleets to deploy, more ships to build, more personnel to train. The aliens would respond to this attack eventually. Humanity needed to be ready when they did. The Second Revenge Fleet launched a week later under Admiral Kenji Tanaka's command. This fleet numbered 18,000 ships as production rates continued to accelerate. Tanaka was a cautious officer, a strategist who preferred preparation over boldness. Catherine had chosen him specifically for that trait. Rodriguez could be the aggressive spearhead, but humanity needed careful commanders too, officers who would protect colonies while hunting aliens. Tanaka's fleet split into smaller battle groups, each assigned to patrol specific sectors. The strategy was to create a defensive perimeter around human space while simultaneously pushing into alien territory. Every colony would have military protection. Every system would be surveyed for alien presence. It was ambitious, perhaps impossible, but humanity was discovering that impossible was just another word for difficult. The aliens responded 3 months after Rodriguez's victory. They hit a mining colony called Redstone with overwhelming force. 200 alien warships appeared without warning and began systematic destruction. But unlike New Haven, Redstone had been fortified. 3,000 human warships were in system when the attack began, part of Tanaka's defensive network. The Battle of Redstone lasted 6 hours and became humanity's first major fleet engagement. The tactical recordings showed ships maneuvering at speeds that pushed crews to the limits of endurance. Missiles crossed millions of kilometers of space, their contrails creating beautiful and deadly patterns. Energy weapons carved through the black, illuminating ships that died in silent explosions. Both sides fought with desperate intensity, knowing that this battle would set the tone for everything that followed. Commander Lisa Park commanded one of the human battle groups at Redstone. Her ship, the Defiant Spirit, led a formation of 200 vessels against an alien squadron that outmassed them significantly. Lisa had been a commercial pilot before the war, flying cargo between colonies. Now she flew a warship, and she flew it well. Her tactical instincts, honed by years of navigating dangerous shipping lanes, translated surprisingly well to combat. She used the asteroid belt that ringed Redstone's inner system as cover, drawing the alien ships into terrain that favored smaller, more maneuverable vessels. The aliens followed, either not recognizing the trap or not caring. Lisa waited until they were committed, then sprang the ambush. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, launching missiles at point-blank range before the aliens could react. 3 alien vessels died in the first volley. The rest scattered, their formation broken. Lisa pressed the advantage. Her battle group pursued relentlessly, giving the aliens no time to regroup. When alien ships turned to fight, she used the defiant spirit as bait, drawing fire while her other vessels flanked and attacked from unexpected angles. It was dangerous, perhaps reckless, but it worked. By the time the main battle concluded, Lisa's group had destroyed 7 alien vessels while losing only 23 of her own. The overall battle ended in what military analysts would later call a tactical draw. The aliens destroyed Redstone's surface installations and killed approximately 50,000 civilians before the evacuation could be completed. Humanity's fleet lost 800 ships, but inflicted similar losses on the alien force. Both sides withdrew to regroup, neither able to claim complete victory. But Catherine saw the true meaning of Redstone in the casualty figures. The aliens had attacked with 200 ships and been fought to a standstill by a force that outnumbered them 15-1. That math was concerning. It suggested that alien vessels were significantly more effective than human ships in direct combat. Humanity's advantage lay in numbers, but if the quality gap was too large, even numerical superiority might not be enough. She convened another meeting of the Combined Fleet Command to discuss implications and strategies. The officers reviewed battle data with intense focus. The aliens possessed better shields, more efficient engines, and weapons with longer effective ranges. Human ships were tougher and carried more missiles. But in a straight fight between equal numbers, the aliens would win. That reality needed to be addressed. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Chen, a physicist who had been studying the wreckage from Rodriguez's first engagement, believed he could adapt alien shield technology for human use. It would require extensive testing and development, but the potential payoff was enormous. Better shields meant human ships could survive longer in combat, closing the effectiveness gap. Catherine gave him unlimited resources and a mandate to work as fast as possible. Dr. Chen assembled a team of the brightest engineers and scientists humanity could offer. They worked in a facility on Mars, isolated from distractions, focused entirely on understanding alien technology and adapting it to human needs. The work was frustrating, often hitting dead ends, but slowly progress emerged. Meanwhile, more revenge fleets launched. The Fifth Fleet, commanded by Admiral Patricia Okonkwo, who had survived New Haven as the former governor, consisted of 35,000 ships. Patricia had insisted on returning to military service despite her age and civilian background. She argued that she had earned the right to fight back, and Catherine couldn't disagree. Patricia brought something valuable beyond military skill. She brought motivation. Her crews fought with the fury of people who had lost everything and wanted revenge. Patricia's fleet pushed deep into alien territory, jumping into systems that no human had ever visited. They found alien colonies, alien outposts, alien infrastructure. Unlike the aliens who had destroyed New Haven without mercy, Patricia offered terms. Her ships would broadcast on all frequencies, evacuate immediately, or be destroyed. She gave them 1 hour. Some alien facilities evacuated, others didn't. Patricia honored her word either way. If the aliens left, she destroyed only military and industrial targets, leaving civilian structures intact. If they stayed, everything burned. She took no pleasure in it, but she felt no guilt either. The aliens had set the rules of this war when they attacked New Haven. Humanity was simply playing by those rules. The alien response escalated. They began attacking human colonies with larger forces, clearly recognizing that humanity would not be intimidated or deterred. The war entered a new phase, one of constant skirmishes and raids across a frontier that stretched across hundreds of light years. Every day brought news of new engagements, new victories, new losses. Captain Thomas Wright commanded a patrol squadron operating near the frontier. His 6 ships were barely enough to handle pirates under normal circumstances, but these weren't normal circumstances. When alien scouts entered his patrol sector, Thomas didn't call for reinforcements. He attacked immediately, using tactics that would have gotten him court-martialed before the war, but now earned him commendations. Thomas realized that human ships might be inferior in individual capability, but they had one advantage. Humans were crazy. Alien vessels followed logical tactical patterns, maintaining optimal ranges, coordinating in predictable formations. Humans didn't do any of that. Thomas would accelerate directly toward enemy ships when he should have maintained distance. He would use his own vessel as a ram when ammunition ran low. He would broadcast insults and challenges on open channels, trying to goad aliens into making mistakes. It worked more often than it should have. The aliens seemed unprepared for opponents who valued aggression over self-preservation. Thomas's squadron destroyed 11 alien vessels over 3 months, while losing only 2 of their own. His superiors weren't sure whether to promote him or relieve him of command. They settled for giving him more ships and telling him to keep doing whatever he was doing. Stories like Thomas's multiplied across the fleet. Humanities officers were learning, adapting, finding ways to fight that leveraged human psychology rather than trying to match alien technology. The concept of acceptable losses entered tactical planning. If destroying 1 alien ship cost 3 human vessels, that was a trade humanity would make. They had ships to spare. The aliens apparently did not. 8 months after the war began, Dr. Chen's team achieved a breakthrough. They successfully installed adapted alien shields on a test vessel and subjected it to weapons fire. The shields held, absorbing damage that would have crippled a standard human ship. The testing crew reported that the shields were not as efficient as pure alien technology, but they were functional and could be mass-produced. Catherine immediately ordered all new construction to include the improved shields. Existing vessels would be retrofitted as quickly as possible. The modification would slow production rates temporarily, but the long-term benefits were undeniable. Human ships with better defenses could engage aliens on more equal terms, reducing casualties and improving effectiveness. The war's first year ended with humanity fielding 160,000 warships across 40 fleets. The alien forces remained mysterious, their total military strength unknown, but they were clearly feeling pressure. Attacks on human colonies decreased in frequency as aliens diverted resources to defend their own territory. The strategic initiative had shifted. Admiral Rodriguez's fleet encountered what appeared to be a major alien supply depot in a system designated Target Echo 9. The facility was massive, containing storage for fuel, ammunition, and supplies sufficient to support thousands of ships. It was also heavily defended by 70 alien warships. Rodriguez attacked anyway, throwing his entire fleet at the target in a battle that lasted 14 hours. The fighting was brutal. Rodriguez lost 3,000 ships, but he destroyed the depot and all defending vessels. The strategic value was immense. That depot had supported alien operations across an entire sector. Its destruction would force aliens to either abandon that sector or extend their supply lines dangerously thin. Rodriguez considered 3,000 ships a bargain price for such an advantage, but the cost in lives haunted him. 3,000 ships meant roughly 30,000 dead crew members. 30,000 people who had families, dreams, futures. Rodriguez attended memorial services broadcast across the fleet and struggled to find words that would make sense of the sacrifice. In the end, he spoke simply. They died fighting for humanity's survival, and that meant something. The second year of the war saw production rates reach their peak. New shipyards had been constructed. Existing facilities expanded. Entire asteroids converted to manufacturing stations. The industrial output was staggering, producing ships faster than crews could be trained to operate them. Catherine authorized the use of AI-assisted systems to compensate, allowing smaller crews to operate larger vessels. This decision was controversial. Artificial intelligence had been heavily regulated after the corporate wars, where AI-controlled weapons had caused massive collateral damage. But these were different times, and desperate times required desperate measures. The AI systems were limited in scope, handling navigation and point defense, while human officers made all tactical decisions. It was a compromise between safety and necessity. Fleet Admiral Jessica Torres commanded the largest human fleet yet assembled, 70,000 ships. Her mission was to strike at what intelligence suggested was a major alien shipyard. If humanity could destroy the aliens' ability to build new vessels, the war would effectively be won through attrition. Torres planned the operation for months, coordinating with other fleets to create diversionary attacks that would draw alien defenders away from the target. The operation launched with simultaneous attacks across 6 systems. Alien forces scrambled to respond, splitting their available ships to counter multiple threats. Torres waited until alien reinforcements had fully committed to the diversions, then jumped her fleet directly to the shipyard system. Her timing was perfect. The shipyard was defended by only 40 alien vessels, completely inadequate against 70,000. The battle was short and decisive. Torres's fleet overwhelmed the defenders within 2 hours and then turned their weapons on the shipyard itself. The facility was enormous, capable of producing hundreds of ships simultaneously. Torres ordered it destroyed completely, and her ships complied with enthusiasm. Missiles and energy weapons reduced the shipyard to debris over the course of 6 hours. When Torres's fleet departed, nothing remained but wreckage and satisfied crews. The destruction of the shipyard marked a turning point. Alien attacks became less frequent and less coordinated. Intelligence reports suggested internal debates within alien leadership about whether to continue the war. Some factions apparently argued for peace negotiations. Others demanded total victory. The divisions worked in humanity's favor, keeping aliens uncertain and reactive rather than united and proactive. Catherine authorized diplomatic overtures through neutral species that had established relationships with both humans and the unknown aliens. The message was simple: stop attacking human colonies, and humanity will cease military operations. Continue the war, and humanity will bring overwhelming force to bear. There would be no negotiations, no compromises. The terms were surrender or destruction. The aliens responded by attacking Earth's solar system. 300 warships emerged from hyperspace near Jupiter, clearly intending to strike at humanity's homeworld. It was a bold move, designed to force humanity into negotiating from a position of weakness. The aliens had miscalculated badly. Earth was not undefended. 15,000 human warships were stationed in Sol's system, having been rotated back for refitting and crew rest. When the alien fleet appeared, Admiral Catherine North personally took command of the defense. She had been waiting for this moment, expecting that aliens would eventually try a decapitation strike against humanity's political and military leadership. The defense plan was already prepared. Catherine's fleet divided into 5 battle groups, each assigned specific intercept vectors. The aliens found themselves surrounded before they fully oriented to the system's layout. Catherine gave them one chance to surrender. They responded by launching missiles at Earth. That was their final mistake. The Battle of Sol was not a battle at all. It was an execution. 15,000 human ships attacked 300 alien vessels with coordinated fury. The engagement lasted 90 minutes. Not a single alien ship escaped. Catherine ordered wreckage preserved for study, but otherwise, the victory was absolute. The aliens had tried to strike at Earth and failed completely. The psychological impact would be enormous. News of the victory spread across human space within hours. Earth, the cradle of humanity, had been attacked and defended successfully. The aliens' best attempt at intimidation had backfired spectacularly. Across all colonies, humans celebrated with relief and renewed determination. If Earth could withstand attack, if the homeworld was safe, then the war was truly winnable. Catherine stood in Olympus's observation deck after the battle. looking down at Earth's blue oceans and green continents. She thought about how close the aliens had come to the planet's surface. Close enough that people on the ground had seen the battle with naked eyes, bright flashes of light against the black of space. Children had watched their planet being defended. They would remember this day forever. She received a communication from Patricia Okonkwo, whose fleet was operating near alien core territory. Patricia had found something interesting, an alien world that appeared to be primarily civilian, with minimal military presence. Intelligence suggested it might be a cultural or governmental center, similar to Earth's role in human space. Patricia asked for authorization to attack. Catherine considered the request carefully. Attacking a civilian world would cross a line that humanity had mostly avoided so far. Yes, Patricia had destroyed alien infrastructure, but always with warnings, always giving civilians a chance to evacuate. A direct attack on a populated world would be different. It would be revenge in its purest form. She thought about New Haven, about 2 million dead civilians who had received no warning, no chance to evacuate, no mercy. She thought about the children in schools, the families in homes, the people living peaceful lives who had been erased without hesitation. The aliens had set the rules. They had shown humanity what they thought acceptable in war. Catherine gave Patricia authorization to proceed, but she included specific instructions. Broadcast warnings on all frequencies, give them time to evacuate. Target military and industrial facilities first. Humanity would match the aliens' brutality, but not exceed it. There were still lines that shouldn't be crossed, still standards that mattered. If humanity became monsters to defeat monsters, what would be the point? Patricia's fleet arrived at the alien world and broadcast warnings for 72 hours. Evacuation ships fled the planet in massive numbers, carrying civilians to safety. Patricia honored her word and did not fire on the evacuation vessels. When the 72 hours expired, her fleet began orbital bombardment of military installations and industrial centers. The attack was precise, controlled, nothing like the indiscriminate destruction the aliens had inflicted on New Haven. But it was still an attack on an alien homeworld, and the symbolism was powerful. Humanity could reach into alien territory and strike at their population centers. Nowhere was safe. The message was clear and unmistakable. This war would continue until the aliens surrendered or were destroyed. There would be no middle ground. The alien response came 3 weeks later, delivered through neutral diplomatic channels. They requested negotiation talks. The message was formal, almost stiff, but it represented the first real communication between the species beyond violence. Catherine agreed to meet with alien representatives at a neutral station, but she made clear that any peace agreement would require significant concessions. The negotiation team included Admiral Rodriguez, Governor Patricia Okonkwo, and several diplomatic specialists. Catherine did not attend personally, believing her presence would suggest humanity was desperate for peace. She wasn't desperate. She was willing to talk, but only if the aliens understood that humanity held the stronger position. The first meeting lasted 6 hours and accomplished little beyond establishing basic communication. The aliens were a species called the Zarethi Collective, a coalition of worlds bound by shared culture and technology. They were old, having achieved space travel thousands of years before humans left Earth. They were used to being dominant, to other species deferring to their superiority. Meeting humans had been a shock to their worldview. The Zarethi explained that they had attacked New Haven because they saw humanity as a threat. Humans expanded aggressively, claimed territory without permission, and showed technological development that might eventually challenge Zarethi dominance. The attack was meant to be a demonstration, a lesson that would teach humanity its proper place in the galactic order. They had not expected humanity to respond with total war. Rodriguez listened to this explanation with barely controlled fury. The Zarethi had killed 2 million people as a lesson. They had destroyed an entire colony because they felt threatened by human potential. He wanted to walk out of the negotiations immediately, to reject any possibility of peace with such callous murderers. But he stayed, because Catherine had ordered him to explore all options before committing to total war. Patricia asked the Zarethi about their military strength. How many ships did they have? How many worlds? What resources could they bring to bear in a prolonged conflict? The Zarethi representatives hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with such direct questions. Eventually, they admitted that the collective controlled approximately 200 worlds and could field perhaps 50,000 warships if fully mobilized. The number hung in the air between species. 50,000 ships was impressive, certainly more than any single human fleet. But humanity now fielded over 400,000 warships and was still building more. The production rate showed no signs of slowing. Within another year, humanity would have 700,000 ships operational. The math was stark and undeniable. Humanity had achieved overwhelming numerical superiority. The Zarethi realized it too. Rodriguez could see the understanding dawn in their alien features, whatever those features meant in terms of emotion. They had poked a bear, expecting it to run away. Instead, the bear had grown 1,000 times larger and was now hunting them with implacable determination. Their demonstration of force had backfired spectacularly. Rodriguez outlined humanity's terms for peace. The Zarethi would withdraw from all systems within 50 light-years of human space. They would pay reparations for the destruction of New Haven. They would surrender the commanders who had ordered the attack to face human justice. They would accept permanent monitoring to ensure compliance with the treaty. The terms were harsh, designed to humiliate the Zarethi as much as ensure peace. The Zarethi representatives asked for time to consult with their government. Rodriguez gave them 1 week. After that, humanity would resume military operations, and this time, there would be no restraint. Every Zarethi world would be targeted. Every ship would be hunted. The war would continue until the collective surrendered unconditionally or ceased to exist. The choice was theirs. The meeting ended without resolution. Rodriguez returned to human space and reported to Catherine. She listened to his account with interest, particularly the revelation about Zarethi numbers. 50,000 ships. That was all they had. Humanity had already destroyed a significant portion of that force. The Zarethi were not an unstoppable enemy. They were just another species, and not even a particularly strong one. Catherine made a decision that would define the war's conclusion. She ordered all 700,000 battlefleets to launch simultaneously. Not for an attack, but for a demonstration. Every ship humanity had built, every vessel that could move under its own power, would gather at a designated system near Zarethi space. It would be the largest military assembly in history, a display of force so overwhelming that no rational being could look at it and choose continued war. The mobilization took 3 weeks to coordinate. Ships from across human space converged on the rally point, arriving in waves that turned the system into a sea of metal and light. Admiral Rodriguez's original 12,000 ships were a tiny fraction of the total. The newest fleets dwarfed everything that had come before. And still, they came, more ships arriving every hour, until the tactical displays could barely track them all. The assembly system became known as Unity Point, a name chosen by the crews themselves. Catherine had wanted something more military, something imposing, but Unity Point had captured the imagination of humanity. 700,000 battle fleets, representing every human colony and station, united in single purpose. The name fit perfectly. Catherine arrived at Unity Point aboard her flagship, the Unbroken Will. She had chosen the name herself after New Haven's destruction. No matter what the aliens did, no matter how many colonies they threatened, humanity's will to survive and fight back would remain unbroken. Standing on the bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing the vast armada, She felt something she hadn't experienced since before the war began. Hope. The sheer scale of the assembly was difficult to comprehend. 700,000 ships occupied a volume of space larger than Earth's solar system. They organized into formations that stretched across millions of kilometers, each fleet maintaining precise positions relative to the others. The coordination required was staggering, a logistical achievement that demonstrated humanity's organizational capacity as clearly as the ships themselves showed industrial might. Admiral Rodriguez commanded the vanguard, his fleet positioned at the front of the formation. Behind him came Patricia Okonkwo's battle groups, then Kenji Tanaka's defensive formations, then Jessica Torres's assault wings. Fleet after fleet stretched back into the distance, each commanded by officers who had proven themselves in combat, each crewed by personnel who had volunteered to defend humanity. Captain Thomas Wright's squadron occupied a position near the center of the formation. Standing on his bridge, he tried to count the ships visible on his tactical display and gave up after reaching 10,000. The numbers were too large, too abstract to process. Each green icon represented a vessel with hundreds of crew members, people with names and families and reasons for fighting. Multiply that by 700,000, and the mind simply couldn't grasp it. Lisa Park commanded a battle group within Patricia's fleet. She had been promoted 3 times in 18 months, rising from ship commander to group commander through demonstrated skill and survival. Looking at the assembled force, she thought about how far humanity had come since Redstone. That battle had been desperate, uncertain. Now humanity had the strength to crush any opponent through sheer weight of numbers. Margaret Chen worked in the logistics division aboard one of the supply vessels supporting the Armada. Her role was unglamorous but essential. Someone had to track fuel consumption, ammunition expenditure, food supplies for millions of personnel. The logistics alone of keeping 700,000 ships operational was more complex than the entire pre-war military had been. Margaret had discovered she had a talent for organization, for seeing patterns in chaos and creating order. Her daughters were safe on Earth, living with Margaret's sister while their mother worked to support the war effort. Margaret communicated with them daily through text messages and occasional video calls. They asked when she would come home. She told them soon, when the war ended, when the people who destroyed their home had been dealt with. The girls were too young to understand revenge, but they understood justice. They knew their mother was doing important work. Catherine recorded a message to be broadcast to the entire Armada. She spoke standing on the Unbroken Wills Bridge, the assembled fleets visible through the viewport behind her. The speech was short, direct, aimed at the hearts of people who had already given so much to this war. She reminded them why they fought. She honored those who had fallen. She promised that the sacrifice would not be in vain. The message concluded with a simple statement. Humanity had been attacked without provocation or mercy. Humanity had responded by building the largest military force in history. Now that force would ensure such an attack never happened again. The aliens would understand that humans were not prey. Humans were predators when threatened. Humans would protect their own with overwhelming force and absolute determination. The broadcast ended, and for a moment silence held across 700,000 ships. Then someone started broadcasting the words that would become humanity's war cry for New Haven. Others picked it up, ship after ship, fleet after fleet, until millions of voices echoed the same phrase. For New Haven. For the 2 million dead. For everyone who had ever called that colony home. Catherine sent a message to the Zarithi Collective through diplomatic channels. The message included coordinates for Unity Point and an invitation for Zarithi observers to witness what they had awakened. She gave them safe passage guarantees and suggested they bring anyone in their leadership who still believed the collective could win a military victory. Come see what humanity had built. Come understand what continued war would mean. 3 days later, a Zarethi observation vessel arrived at Unity Point. The ship carried diplomats, military officers, and what humans would call journalists. Catherine had her fleet maintain attack readiness status, weapons armed but not targeted. She wanted the Zarethi to feel both safe and terrified. They needed to understand that humanity could destroy them at any moment but chose not to, and that choice could be revoked. The Zarethi observers were taken on a tour of the assembly. Their vessel traveled through the formations, past fleet after fleet, each larger than the last. The journey took 6 hours at sublight speeds, and still they barely covered a fraction of the total force. The Zarethi said little during the tour, but their body language spoke volumes. Whatever they had expected, it wasn't this. Rodriguez met with the Zarethi military officers aboard the Righteous Fury. He showed them tactical data from every major engagement of the war, demonstrating how humanity had adapted and improved. He explained the production capacity that had built this armada and made clear that it hadn't stopped. More ships were being built right now. The 700,000 vessels at Unity Point represented humanity's current strength, not its maximum potential. The Zarethi admiral, whose name translated roughly as Cloudwalker, asked how humanity had accomplished so much so quickly. Rodriguez smiled without humor and explained that humans were excellent at war. They had been fighting each other for thousands of years before reaching space. The corporate wars had been brutal, teaching humanity how to mobilize industry and population for total war. The Zarethi had given humanity a reason to apply those lessons on an unprecedented scale. Cloudwalker wanted to know why humanity had built so many ships. Surely a fraction of this force would have been sufficient to defeat the collective. Rodriguez's smile disappeared. He explained that humanity had not built these fleets only to fight the Zarethi. The ships would remain operational after the war ended. They would form a permanent defensive force, ensuring no species ever again thought attacking humans was acceptable. This armada was a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity was done being vulnerable. The observation tour concluded with a meeting between Catherine and the Zarethi diplomatic delegation. They met aboard the Unbroken Will in a conference room that had been designed for exactly this purpose. Catherine sat across from the lead diplomat, a Zarethi called Thoughtweaver, and laid out humanity's final terms. The terms had expanded since Rodriguez's earlier negotiation. The Zarethi collective would withdraw from all systems within 100 light-years of human space, double the original demand. Reparations would be paid in resources and technology, not currency. The commanders who ordered New Haven's destruction would face human justice, with trials broadcast across both civilizations. The collective would accept permanent human monitoring stations in their territory, and they would publicly acknowledge responsibility for starting the war. Thoughtweaver protested that the terms were too harsh, that the collective had pride and dignity to maintain. Catherine's response was cold and precise. New Haven's colonists had pride and dignity too. 2 million people had died because the collective decided to teach humanity a lesson. Now humanity was teaching the collective a lesson about consequences. The terms were non-negotiable. Accept them, or face total war against 700,000 battlefleets. The Zarethi diplomat asked for guarantees that humanity would not use its military superiority to conquer collective worlds. Catherine had anticipated this concern. She explained that humans had no interest in ruling aliens. Managing 300 human colonies was complicated enough without adding foreign species. What humanity wanted was security, deterrence, and justice. Give them that, and the fleets would remain defensive. Thoughtweaver requested time for the collective government to consider the terms. Catherine granted 72 hours. During that time, the Armada would remain at Unity Point in full combat readiness. If the collective rejected the terms, humanity's response would be immediate and overwhelming. Every Zarethi world would be invaded simultaneously. Resistance would be met with escalating force. The war would end with either collective surrender or collective extinction. The Zarethi delegation departed Unity Point with recordings and data that would shock their government. 700,000 ships was not a number that could be dismissed or rationalized away. It represented overwhelming force applied with singular focus. The collective had started this war believing themselves superior. They were about to learn a hard truth about humanity. Humans might be younger and less technologically advanced, but they had something the collective lacked: absolute determination. While waiting for the Zarethi response, Catherine toured several ships in the Armada. She wanted to speak with ordinary crew members to understand what they were thinking and feeling after 18 months of war. The visits were unannounced, spontaneous, preventing commanders from preparing scripted responses. Aboard a destroyer called the Second Chance, Catherine met with a crew of young officers who had been civilians 2 years ago. The ship's captain had been a mathematics teacher, the tactical officer had worked in agriculture, the engineer had managed a water treatment facility. None had military experience before the war, yet they operated their vessel with competence born of necessity and training. Catherine asked them what they would do after the war ended. The responses varied. Some wanted to return to civilian life, to rebuild careers and families disrupted by mobilization. Others had discovered they liked military service, the camaraderie and purpose it provided. A few admitted they didn't know. War had changed them in ways they were still processing. The person who enlisted 18 months ago felt like a stranger now. The engineer, a woman named Sarah who reminded Catherine of Lieutenant Morrison from New Haven, asked if humanity would really keep all these ships operational after peace was achieved. Catherine confirmed that was the plan. Earth's government had already approved permanent expansion of the military. Never again would humanity be caught unprepared. The fleets would be maintained, rotated, upgraded. What started as revenge would become deterrence. Aboard a battlecruiser named the Iron Promise, Catherine met with a veteran crew that had fought at Redstone, Saul, and a dozen other engagements. These were hardened warriors who had seen friends die and enemies destroyed. The ship's commander, Captain David Wu, had lost his entire family when aliens raided a mining colony early in the war. He fought not for ideology or duty, but for personal vengeance that would never be satisfied. David asked Catherine if she thought the Zarethi would accept the terms. Catherine admitted uncertainty. The collective was old and proud. Accepting such harsh conditions would be difficult for their leadership. But the alternative was extinction, and even proud species usually chose survival over pride. The question was whether Zarethi leadership would make the rational choice or let emotion drive them to destruction. The 72 hours passed slowly. Catherine spent the time reviewing contingency plans for various Zarethi responses. If they accepted the terms, humanity would need occupation forces to ensure compliance. If they rejected the terms, humanity would need invasion plans for 200 worlds simultaneously. Both scenarios required enormous coordination and resources. The logistics staff worked constantly, preparing for either outcome. Thomas Wright used the waiting time to drill his squadron on attack patterns. His crews had fought together for over a year, developing instinctive coordination that made them deadly despite their inexperience. Thomas believed in constant training, in keeping his people sharp even during downtime. The aliens had taught humanity that complacency killed. That was a lesson worth remembering. Lisa Park gathered her battle group commanders for a meeting about post-war transition. If peace came, what would happen to all these ships and personnel? Would there be a massive demobilization like after the corporate wars? Would people return to civilian life, or had war become the new normal? Lisa had opinions about the future and wanted her subordinates thinking about it too. Planning for peace was as important as preparing for war. Margaret Chen organized supply distribution schedules that would support either peace or continued war. Her work was the invisible foundation that kept fleets operational. People didn't think about logistics until something went wrong, until ammunition ran out or fuel supplies dried up. Margaret took pride in ensuring that never happened. Her contribution might not be glorious, but it was essential. The Zarithi response came exactly 72 hours after their delegation departed. A diplomatic vessel arrived at Unity Point carrying Thoughtweaver and several high-ranking collective officials. Catherine met them in the same conference room, but this time the atmosphere was different. The Zarithi carried themselves with the posture of defeated beings accepting inevitable terms. Thoughtweaver spoke formally, reading from a prepared statement. The Zarithi Collective accepted humanity's terms in their entirety. They acknowledged responsibility for initiating hostilities. They would withdraw from disputed territory, pay reparations, and submit to monitoring. The commanders who ordered New Haven's destruction would be surrendered to human justice. The Collective requested only that humanity show mercy in victory and allow Zarithi civilization to survive with dignity. Catherine accepted the surrender on behalf of humanity. She made clear that compliance would be verified strictly. Any violation would result in immediate military response. The occupation forces would be professional but firm. The reparations would be collected on schedule. The war crimes trials would be public and fair. Humanity would not be cruel, but neither would it be lenient. The Collective had earned every consequence coming to them. The formal treaty signing occurred aboard the Unbroken Will 3 days later. Representatives from both species signed documents establishing the peace terms. Cameras recorded everything for broadcast across both civilizations. Catherine signed with her personal seal, the same seal she had used to authorize mobilization 18 months ago. The circle was complete. News of the peace treaty spread across human space within hours. The reactions were mixed. Relief that the war had ended without further bloodshed, satisfaction that humanity had won decisively, uncertainty about what came next. The war had unified humanity in ways that peacetime never had. Would that unity persist, or would old divisions resurface? Catherine addressed humanity in a broadcast from Unity Point. She stood before the assembled fleets, 700,000 ships representing humanity's might and determination. She spoke of sacrifice and victory, of fallen heroes and hard-won peace. She promised that the fleets would remain operational, that humanity would never again be caught unprepared, that New Haven would be remembered forever. The Zarithi commanders responsible for New Haven's destruction were transported to human custody. There were 7 of them, high-ranking officers who had planned and executed the attack. They would stand trial at a tribunal established specifically for war crimes. The trials would be fair, with proper legal representation and evidence presented according to standard judicial procedure. Humanity wanted justice, not revenge. There was a difference. The trials lasted 6 months. Evidence was presented meticulously, documenting every decision that led to New Haven's destruction. The commanders attempted various defenses. They were following orders. They believed humanity was a threat. They didn't understand the attack would kill so many civilians. None of the defenses held up under scrutiny. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. All 7 were found guilty. The sentences were imprisonment for life with no possibility of release. Some humans had demanded execution, but Catherine argued against it. Killing the commanders would make them martyrs in Zarithi culture. Life imprisonment ensured they would be forgotten, their names associated only with defeat and failure. That was a more fitting punishment. The occupation of Zarithi territory proceeded according to plan. Human forces established monitoring stations across the collective space, ensuring compliance with treaty terms. The withdrawal from disputed systems was verified and documented. Reparations began flowing to human space, resources and technology that would benefit colonies for generations. Patricia Okonkwo was appointed as administrator for the occupation forces. Her experience as New Haven's governor made her ideal for managing the transition from war to peace. She approached the role with fairness, tempered by vigilance. The Zarithi were a defeated enemy who deserved basic dignity, but they were also a species that had demonstrated willingness to commit genocide. Trust would have to be earned slowly. Rodriguez returned to active fleet command, leading one of the 7 primary battle groups that would form humanity's permanent defensive forces. His wartime experience made him valuable for training the next generation of officers. He taught classes at the new military academy established on Mars, sharing lessons learned from 18 months of constant combat. Tanaka took responsibility for defensive doctrine, developing strategies for protecting human colonies against future threats. The Zarethi had been defeated, but the galaxy was large and full of unknown species. Humanity needed to be ready for whatever came next. Tanaka's careful nature made him perfect for anticipating dangers and planning countermeasures. Torres became commandant of the Naval Academy, responsible for training officers who would crew humanity's expanded military. The academy grew from a small institution training a few hundred officers annually to a massive complex training tens of thousands. The curriculum emphasized adaptability, initiative, and the aggressive tactics that had proven effective against the Zarethi. Thomas Wright was promoted to admiral and given command of a frontier patrol fleet. His unconventional methods had proven valuable during the war, and Catherine wanted officers who could think creatively posted where they might encounter new threats. Thomas accepted the promotion with his typical irreverence, joking that he had finally found a job that paid him to be reckless. Lisa Park took a position training fighter tactics, teaching new pilots the maneuvers that had kept her alive through dozens of engagements. She was young for such responsibility, barely 30, but combat experience counted more than age. Her students learned from someone who had survived when survival wasn't guaranteed. Margaret Chen returned to civilian life once the occupation stabilized. She reopened a bakery on a colony world, not New Haven, which was being slowly rebuilt, but a smaller settlement that needed skilled workers. Her daughters helped in the shop after school, learning the trade their mother had practiced before the war interrupted everything. Sometimes Margaret thought about those desperate hours fleeing New Haven. Mostly, she tried not to. The New Haven Memorial was established on Earth, a massive wall listing every name of the 2 million dead. Catherine attended the dedication ceremony, standing in the rain as speakers honored the fallen. The memorial included a single line of text below the names. They were the first. They will be the last. It was a promise, a commitment that humanity would never again allow such tragedy to occur. The 700,000 Battlefleets began the slow process of transitioning from wartime operations to peacetime readiness. Ships that had been built quickly for war were upgraded or replaced with vessels designed for longer service life. Crews rotated home for leave, replaced by fresh personnel who had completed training. The machinery of war became the machinery of deterrence. Catherine remained as Fleet Admiral, overseeing the transformation of humanity's military from a temporary emergency force into a permanent institution. She worked from Olympus Station, coordinating with military leadership across human space. The job was exhausting, demanding, and lonely, but she accepted it as her responsibility. Someone had to ensure humanity remained ready. 5 years after New Haven's destruction, Catherine stood in her office aboard Olympus and reviewed deployment schedules for the fleet. 700,000 ships spread across human space and beyond, maintaining watch for threats. The Zarethi Collective had submitted to occupation peacefully, their military strength broken, their pride humbled. Other species in the region had taken notice of humanity's response to aggression. She received regular reports of first contact situations with new alien species. Each time, the pattern was similar. Initial communication, establishing relationships, discussing trade and cultural exchange. And then, inevitably, the new species would ask about humanity's military capabilities. Catherine always ensured they received accurate information. 700,000 warships built in response to one destroyed colony. The message was clear. Some species reacted with respect, others with fear, a few with curiosity about how humanity had mobilized so completely. Catherine explained it simply. Humans protected their own. Attack one human colony, and humanity would respond with everything available. It wasn't aggression, it was deterrence. It was a promise that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The galaxy was large, and humanity was still a relatively young species. Other civilizations had existed for thousands or millions of years, had achieved technological marvels that humans could barely comprehend. But none of that mattered when it came to the fundamental question. Would you risk attacking humanity? The answer, increasingly, was no. Catherine thought about Zhang's final message from New Haven, his desperate attempt to communicate and understand why the attack was happening. The answer had been simple. The Zarethi saw humans as a threat and decided to eliminate that threat preemptively. They had been wrong about human weakness, but perhaps not entirely wrong about human danger. Humanity had proven itself capable of total war, of mobilizing completely in response to existential threat. 700,000 warships represented not just military might, but cultural commitment. Every human colony had contributed. Every shipyard had worked around the clock. Every volunteer had stepped forward. When humanity decided something needed to be done, it marshaled resources on a scale that shocked other species. That capability made humanity dangerous in a way that went beyond weapons technology or fleet numbers. It meant humanity could not be defeated through conventional military superiority. Even a species with better technology and more experience would struggle against opponents willing to build 700,000 ships to avenge one colony. The math simply didn't work. Victory would cost more than any rational calculation justified. Catherine received a message from the rebuilt New Haven colony. They had invited her to attend the 17-year anniversary of the original settlement, now also marking 5 years since the attack and rebuilding. She accepted immediately. Some ceremonies mattered more than schedules and responsibilities. The New Haven was different from the original. The cities had been rebuilt with defensive considerations, shelters capable of housing entire populations, orbital defenses that could hold off any reasonable attack. But the spirit remained the same. Colonists who had lost everything had chosen to return, to rebuild, to make clear that humanity would not be driven from worlds they claimed as home. Catherine walked through streets lined with earth oak trees, second-generation plantings from seeds saved by evacuees. Children played in parks built on sites where buildings had once burned. Markets sold bread and coffee, merchants gossiping about weather and crops. It looked peaceful, ordinary. Exactly what the original colonists had wanted when they first arrived 17 years ago. She attended a memorial service for the 2 million dead. Survivors spoke about lost family members, about friends who hadn't made it off the planet, about the community that had been destroyed. Some cried. Others maintained composure through visible effort. All remembered. The past couldn't be changed, but it could be honored. After the service, Catherine met with Margaret Chen, who had traveled from her new home to attend. They sat in a cafe, drinking coffee and talking about nothing important. Margaret showed pictures of her daughters, now teenagers, discussing their plans for college and careers, normal things, everyday concerns, the kind of life that had been interrupted by war. Margaret asked if Catherine thought it was worth it. All the death and destruction, the massive cost of building and maintaining 700,000 warships. Catherine considered the question carefully. 2 million dead could never be brought back. The resources spent on the military might have built colonies or funded research or improved lives. War always had costs that extended beyond immediate casualties. But then Catherine thought about the alternative. If humanity had not responded forcefully, the Zarethi would have continued attacking colonies. Other species might have seen humanity as weak, as prey rather than equals. New Haven would have been the first of many massacres. The price of not fighting would have been measured in tens of millions of dead and the loss of humanity's future in space. She told Margaret that yes, it was worth it. Not because war was good or noble, but because the alternative was unacceptable. Humanity had built 700,000 battlefleets to ensure New Haven's tragedy never repeated. That investment had bought security not just for current colonies, but for generations to come. The cost was enormous, but the alternative cost would have been civilization itself. They finished their coffee and said goodbye. Margaret returned to her family and bakery. Catherine returned to Olympus and the endless work of maintaining humanity's defenses. They were ordinary people who had lived through extraordinary times, forever changed by events beyond their control. The galaxy continued turning, stars burning in patterns unchanged by human drama. New species emerged into space, beginning their own journeys of exploration and expansion. Some encountered humanity and learned about the 700,000 battlefleets. They heard the story of New Haven, of how one destroyed colony had triggered the largest military mobilization in recorded history. The story became legend, spreading through trade routes and diplomatic channels. Other species told it to their children as a cautionary tale about the dangers of provoking humans. The species that had destroyed a single human colony had faced total war from 700,000 battlefleets. The mathematics of deterrence was clear and brutal. Humanity would protect its own with overwhelming force. Remember that lesson. Catherine grew old in service to the fleet. She remained fleet admiral for 20 years after the war ended, finally retiring at an age when most people had long since left active duty. Her replacement was Admiral Rodriguez, now gray-haired and decorated with honors from campaigns across human space. He accepted the position with appropriate gravity, understanding the responsibility of commanding 700,000 warships. On her final day in office, Catherine stood in Olympus's observation deck one last time. Below, Earth continued its eternal rotation, unchanged by human efforts. Above, the stars beckoned with promises of discovery and danger. Between Earth and the stars, 700,000 warships maintained watch, ready to respond to any threat with overwhelming force. She thought about New Haven, the colony that had been lost and rebuilt. She thought about the 2 million dead who would never see humanity's victory or the peace that followed. She thought about the terrified refugees who had fled burning cities, not knowing if they would survive. She thought about Admiral Zhang, dying at his post while following regulations to the end. All of it had led to this moment, to humanity standing among the stars with military might that commanded respect and fear from every species that had learned what happened when humans were attacked. 700,000 battle fleets existed because one colony had been lost. That was the equation humanity had written in fire and metal across the galaxy. That was the lesson other species would remember for generations to come. Catherine left Olympus without ceremony, boarding a shuttle that would take her back to Earth. She had spent 20 years ensuring humanity would never again face destruction unprepared. Now others would carry that responsibility forward. Her work was complete. The colonies were safe. The fleets were ready. The war had ended, but the vigilance would continue forever. New Haven thrived under blue skies and an orange sun, a living memorial to the people who had died and the determination of those who survived. Children played in streets named for heroes of the war. Markets bustled with life and commerce. Schools taught history lessons about the day aliens attacked, and humanity responded by building 700,000 battle fleets for revenge. The story was over, but its consequences would echo through centuries. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not through peaceful expansion, but through demonstrated willingness to fight with absolute commitment when threatened. The galaxy had learned a lesson about humans. Leave them alone, or face the full weight of their industrial might and collective fury. In the darkness between stars, human ships maintained eternal watch, weapons ready, crews alert. 700,000 battlefleets stood guard over 347 colonies, ensuring that what happened to New Haven would never happen again. The vigilance was expensive, demanding, and absolutely necessary. It was the price humanity paid for security and the promise that colonists could live their lives without fear of extermination. The war had ended with humanity victorious, the Zerethi defeated, and peace maintained through overwhelming deterrence. A colony was lost, and humanity had launched 700,000 battlefleets for revenge. Now those fleets ensured no other colony would ever be lost again. That was victory. That was justice. That was humanity's answer to a galaxy that had tried to teach them weakness. They had learned a different lesson. Attack humanity at your peril, because humanity never forgives and never forgets.